on, you bastard!
Brought to you by FlexiSpot, leading the kinetic furniture movement across the world. ...2022 was a weird year when it came to official Hasbro offerings, because it seems like they were desperately trying to make an effort to break free from the trappings of the Warden era, but not quite succeeding. I'm not going to go too into it, because a lot of it I've already covered in the previous video on that particular year, but Legacy definitely took a while to truly start feeling like Legacy. But that's not to say it was a bad year by any means, oh no. It's just, as far as collecting years go, this was probably one of the more erratic ones for me. Nowhere was that more evident than with my best of the year list, consisting of a whole bunch of weirdos and randoms. But just because the collection wasn't consistent in terms of its best offerings over the year doesn't mean we shouldn't celebrate what it gave us. It's important to look back at what surprised us, what wowed us, and what made us smile. So let's take a trip down memory lane and do another extremely overdue ranking of the year's best. Greetings, Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to the top 22 Transformers of 2022. Yeah, we're not quite at last year yet, but don't worry, we'll get there eventually. Just gonna take a bit longer, so bear with me for a bit. As per usual, we gotta set the ground rules. The ground rules nobody's going to pay attention to anyway and claim I'm doing these lists and reviews wrong. But we still gotta set them. Rule number 1, it's figures I got, not figures that came out. It's a catalogue of my personal collecting journey, not the definitive list of officially released Transformers. This is YouTube, not OTCA. This is about celebrating what I like, not coming up with an objective marker. In the same vein, list choices are entirely subjective. It's purely what I like, nothing more. Though I've never believed in the true objective for reviewing. Different folks have different criteria for covering toys, and that's totally valid. Though this is the one I know people will skim over, because the most common criticism I always see is that I keep trying to push my shitty opinions on everyone else, which is blatantly false. Hence why I guarantee nobody will pay attention to this part. Nobody ever does. Thirdly, this list includes third party. I love Hasbro products, but I don't only love Hasbro products. So to the three of you that are disgusted by my decision, tough. And fourthly, a newish rule. Only one list article per set of characters. Whether it's a combiner or a box set or a team, either one member represents all of them or the list article covers all of them. It's not something that's become really necessary until now, but with multiple combiner teams dropping in this particular year in question, I don't want to clog the list up with them. And with that, I think we're sweet. I've already wasted enough time. It's basically been 2 years already. Let's get right to it. Right after I adjust my chair. Wait, this chair isn't supposed to be adjustable. Today's video is brought to you by FlexiSpot, creator of the C7, an ergonomic office chair that improves posture for all your work, YouTube watching, and toxic habits. Post-pandemic, we all ended up buying a lot of useless nonsense we didn't actually need. I don't even know where this thing comes from, it just sorta showed up. And it's probably making my posture even worse than Supreme Cheetor. I think I need to get rid of this thing before I die filming videos on my Lightbox. And what better way to do that than the C7? This ergonomic office chair improves posture and encourages better back health long term. This thing is very versatile, working in multiple configurations. Like, I can easily use this thing between working on the scripting and editing portions of this video, then adjust everything and bring it over to the Lightbox to do the filming portions. Yes, I no longer film on the floor, and this chair probably facilitates— get off that, Archibald. I realize the chair is really comfy, but I'm trying to do an ad here. Please let me finish this. Unlike a lot of office chairs on the market, this one doesn't require any extra cushions due to its additional support to the back, which itself is adjustable too. It's also significantly wider than a good amount of the competition, offering plenty of space for— Archibald, please just let me get through this. I have a job to do. It's even very easy to assemble. FlexiSpot has put a lot of effort into making the experience as smooth and painless as possible. Way more effort than I put into setting up this shot where you can't even see the building process. Just take my word for it, it was pretty painless. Also kinda cool, they have the same QC stickers as New Age figures. Archibald, you are not a New Age figure. The unit you see before you is the mesh version, but it also comes in a nice cushiony foam version as well. And there are plenty of other options on the website you can access too, or at least I would be able to access the website if Archibald would get out of the way. The C7 comes with a 30-day return policy in case it's not to your liking, and beyond that you get a solid 10-year warranty for anything that may happen down the line. So if you're in the mood to get rid of weird extra-dimensional chairs that will ruin your spine and replace it with something that'll actually help with posture, head on over to flexispot.com and use the code C730 for $30 off. Act now before this shark gnaws my legs off. Wait, what? Archibald, no! Please just let me do this ad! I need money to buy the rest of Iron Factory Lio Kaiser! Archibald, no! FlexiSpot, leading the kinetic furniture movement across the world.
Number 22.
Studio Series has this annoying thing where it seems to be allergic to creative redecos. We know the reason why. Designers have cited sales in Asia as a factor for not requiring redecos. So instead, it's all about pure screen accuracy. No Night Watch or First Strike or G2 GoBot or Payload for you, kiddo. It's a real shame too, because the line has a lot of great molds that I'd love to see get used again. And I think Nest Bumblebee is the perfect example for that. A window into what could have been. Conceptually, he seems kinda dumb. Jeep Bumblebee is one of the best molds adjacent to that film, but nobody really gives him the credit for that. All that simple but awesome engineering, all that subtle but bonkers vehicle mode accuracy. Nah, let's forget he ever existed and talk how Car Shatter is instead. Then to do it again in grey, why the fuck would you do that? It's not even a canonical thing, at least it doesn't seem to be, since there's no evidence of this deco in the version test audiences were shown. I didn't really care for the idea, but I was in a shit mood the day I got it. I kept begging my sister not to get a Mac as her first computer, but she insisted on getting an Air regardless. One that ended up breaking 4 months later and costing $700 to fix. Do you see why I begged her not to go with Apple? In my anger, I grabbed the closest Transformer toy I could see to cheer me up, and it just so happened to be this guy. And oh boy, it was a good call. Already the engineering was brilliant. Already it was buttery smooth with excellent hand feel. But one thing I never counted on was how sexy this thing looked. The stock photos betray Nest Bumblebee. He's not grey and dull. He's actually coated in this gorgeous gunmetal combined with the piercing night vision transparent green. This is the subtle brilliance that was missed with the other two Nest redecos. It's why he works and the others don't. He is a toy where the extent of his brilliance really boils down to he's a great mold in a great deco, and often that's all the figure needs to do to cement itself in the pantheon of top tier figures. It's just a shame Hasbro learns nothing from this outing, fumbled the bag harder than myself the first time I went out with a guy, then overstocked to oblivion, leaving the others to shelf warm. Just fans don't want redecos that aren't accurate, suppose we won't bother in the future. Maybe that's why Bumblebee failed to make an impact, and it's a real shame, but that does not diminish my love for this figure. He's wormed his way into my heart and made a nest for himself. Okay, no, that pun doesn't work. It. Next one!
Number 21.
I've said this many a time before, but one of the most difficult Seeker decos to pull off is the unreleased G2 Sandstorm paint scheme. You basically have to juggle 3 or 4 shades in a splotch pattern that is consistent, evenly spread, solid, and rich in all shades. This was the biggest issue I took with the Earthrise version, beyond the annoyance of it being an Earthrise Starscream-alike. It is prohibitively difficult to pull off something like this though, because it requires basically unlimited budget works with how much you have to slather the thing. So, quite fortunate that Iron Factory was able to succeed with such. The Iron Factory Seeker mold was one that experienced an extremely long tenure, utterly demolishing the competition in both releases and sales. It beat DX9, it beat Magic Square, and it even managed to beat New Age by coming in at a much cheaper price. And at the end of it all, Sandstorm was one of the final decos they released, around the same time as Nacelle, if memory serves. And by God did they go out with a bang. None of the stylings are lost with this release. The awesome mechanical detail, the killer proportions, the snazzy head sculpts. It's a super stylish figure, just as the many before him were. The missiles do a great job reinventing themselves to fit into the Conehead panache, and the alt mode actually looks complete. Yes, it's a third-party figure that doesn't have to pigeonhole its paint budget into a standard Voyager bracket, but you cannot deny they absolutely went hard here. Forget this thing. This is my definitive Sandstorm. G2, that is. Wonder if there's been a more reused name in the franchise so far. Either way, the Iron Factory Seekers have been a wonderful journey, and this was a killer way to sign things off. The company may not be pushing the envelope as much these days, especially in the wake of other third-party Legends releases, but they've still got it. All these years later.
Number 20.
I genuinely expected to hate this figure. I truly thought this was an easy skip. I mean, it's the Earthrise van mold, one of the worst molds that line released, and by extension, one of the worst of the trilogy. Why didn't they just make it out of the superior Siege version? Why didn't they wait until the 86 version? Why were we stuck with this dog shit? Of course, in a situation like this, you do the logical thing. Don't bother putting down a pre-order and move on with your life. Easy as, right? Well, a few months later, I was chilling with my friends at the utterly abysmal Wahlburgers at Circular Quay.
Yeah, nah, don't go here. It's complete shit.
On that night, one of my friends brought some stolen factory samples he had recently purchased. It, later turned out the seller was fandom Parasite Athena art, also responsible for the Road Ranger leak and multiple doxings. Needless to say, my friend was horrified when he found out. But one thing I took away from that night was the guard was actually really good. Immediately I put in a pre-order, and I'm so glad I did. The patchwork effect in the vehicle mode actually doesn't come across that bad in these darker colors. Not just because of the color matching, but because it just genuinely works. works. Black convoy effect in action, baby! It's such a mean van mode, too, doubly with repro labels. I don't usually put stickers over clear plastic, but I think it works a lot better here. Though, I also had to fix the back because the original had awful feet sticking out there. The robot mode is absolutely lovely, revealing all the hidden red and wearing its vehicle parts loud and proud, rather than hiding it behind a billion panels for the sake of screen accuracy. Yes, I did put a lot of work into this one with various upgrades, but my rule is always to upgrade figures I genuinely like, not fix ones I don't. And at least from that fateful night, I genuinely liked this figure, but now I like it even more. I think it goes to show that this mold always had some decent qualities under the hood. It was mostly bogged down with mismatched hues and retooled bits, which this manages to circumvent by virtue of the color scheme he's homaging. I didn't expect them to outdo the custom I made a while ago, which was basically the whole reason I made that custom in the first place. But somehow, they managed to. They did a damn good job, and you can see now why I fell so hard into Diaclone completionism. But you know what? No regrets. I reckon it was worth it. Or at least it will be, once they release Loud Pedal and Mirage.
Number 19.
Over the years, I'm not particularly sure there's been a small-scale sound wave that's really nails the vibe of the character. There's been plenty that are accurate, but I've always wanted one that has that utilitarian feel, where it has the cold, calculating vibe, but also the aura that he can deck your shit at a second's notice. Core Class was decent for what it was. The New Age wasn't bad, but it was way too overcomplicated. Magic Square was extremely over-engineered and not fun to mess with at all, made even worse by the shitty materials, right after Menasor where they proved they could do the materials properly. Dr. Wu was so small that just messing with him was an exercise in frustration, and we don't talk about Iron Factory's first attempts. F that thing. Doing a sound wave at any scale isn't difficult, but nailing him is another story. And I don't think this niche of the franchise has managed to, up until now. Iron Factory's second attempt at Soundwave is everything I've ever wanted from the design. Massive shins to show he gets shit done, the piercing gold chest window that proves he means business, the utterly gorgeous head sculpt and articulation that's to die for. It brings me back to the best memories of Hound and makes me wish they'd fully committed to this style, allowing the experience to override the specific design. And if that wasn't enough, it goes even further because he's a triple changer. The truck mode looked a wee bit compromised in the stock photography, but in person it really sells the Cybertronian battering ram feel. With its pinned wheels, it's really fun to roll around. Plus, it automatically gets a bit of leeway as a triple changer trying to pull off two very different shapes. And, well, you know. Oh, right, I got a new sign from Firebytes, so I can finally update the graphic. Thanks, man. I'm still not getting into Beastbox, though. And the micro cassette player, yeah, it's got a few compromises. The shaping has oft been described as wrong, and a lot of people have said the entire triple changing gimmick should have been dumped in favor of getting this right. But like, is this not the point? It's the experience of a triple changing sound wave. There's going to be compromises. But for those who want it for what it does, those compromises aren't going to matter. If you want a wholly accurate sound wave, there are options on the market. This one knows what it's doing, and it does it exceptionally well. You get this sound wave for the unique experience it offers, and that experience is ultimately what places it on not just this list, but in my heart as my definitive Legends sound wave.
Number 18.
It's unfortunate that for a while here, Studio Series scaled back on the base stuff. For 2023, I do get it, as we're heading into new film territory. But the following year, it does feel mostly absent as they kill time with all the concept art stuff. And as for 2022, it's also felt a bit lacking. We did get releases, but they were definitely slowing down compared to previous years. Anything to avoid making skids and mudflap, I guess. That's why I'm extra glad Hot Rod turned out as good as he did. For a time, he was the last hurrah of the original film continuity, until it went into what many considered a hiatus from Bayhem. No, I do not consider Bumblebee or Rise of the Beasts prequel to the original 5 films. I don't care what Lorenzo says. The bad Lorenzo, not the good one. I am so sorry, Felici. You don't deserve a name tied to that buffoon. Where was I? Oh, right, Hot Rods. This thing is wonderful. The engineering doesn't even feel like a mainline Hasbro figure. It feels closer to something third party would do, in the DX9 unique toy school of mass usage. The articulation is buttery smooth and super expressive. It's incredibly easy to get this guy into a pose that makes him look dynamic. Flipping back and forth is super engaging. Figuring out or rediscovering where everything goes is mesmerizing. And sure, the alt mode is a bit more panely than usual, but if that's the sacrifice that's needed for everything else to work so well, I'll happily take it. Weird that he comes with a spoiler though. Maybe it was a stipulation from Lamborghini. This deluxe just rules in ways that make him feel more premium than the price point usually is. If this is the level that Bayverse is going to be done in 2025, I'm really excited for what's to come. Though it's hard to say at this point. Hot Rod is a bit of a standout amongst Studio Series Deluxes, so we don't know for sure what level they'll be achieving, doubly so given most hands will be on deck for the Devastator project. Oh well, still excited to see what awaits beyond the horizon.
Number 17.
Fans Hobby ain't necessarily the best company on the 3PMP block. They make some great releases, sure, but they also make some kinda shit ones too. One I cannot stand is their Armada Optimus Prime. Just the weird third-party syndrome-esque aesthetic and the abysmal kibble management. Give me Armada Prime any day. And their Minerva is just abysmal. I'm pretty sure she's shown up on a previous worst list several years back. It was really disappointing when the only other options at the time were a Toy Hacks conversion kit that's complete nightmare fuel and the absurdly difficult to get Wonderfest version, which is so complicated to assemble I still haven't cracked it. Can you see why I was so happy to finally get a Chug outing in Legacy? One thing you cannot accuse them of is a lack of passion. Even at their worst, you can see they genuinely care about the character designs and try to imbue their figures with as much love as they can. They care about what they do, and this quality is even exhibited in their opportunistic redecos. Pyro isn't exactly the kind of guy who'd get his own molds, either officially or in third party. Outside of the RDW rep, he's just not got that much street creds. And I mean, can you blame him? Half the people can't even remember which line he released in. G1? G2? Tickle my balls? Who's to say? And yet, they still put in an insane amount of effort into this thing. They didn't just give up because, oh, nobody's going to care for either this or the original Hoseheads. They took all the faults with Minerva and fixed pretty much everything, delivering an endlessly satisfying experience. The paintwork actually looks premium now, the kibble management isn't abysmal, and he feels like a masterpiece figure. They refused to accept mediocrity, like so many third-party companies do in the face of criticism. They didn't turn faults into features, they made things better, and I love them for that. Pyro is a striking release that instantly lights up any situation he's in, though maybe don't bring him to the strip club as you might get kicked out. It's not an experience many will get to have, given its absurd rarity and lack of reissue options. I mean, I just happened to get lucky when a friend of mine imported for another friend, and that friend pulled out, so I asked the original friend if I could have it, and he gave it to me right before listing it on Facebook. Right place, right time, I guess. But I am glad I get to have this experience. He's got a style none of the other figures of this year have. Perhaps it doesn't matter that he doesn't neatly fit into a defined space of Transformers history. Perhaps he can just be Pyro.
Number 16.
I love the Laser Prime design. It's just a perfect, well-rounded representation of everything that makes Transformers collecting fun, with a dynamicism that lends itself so well to articulation, a simple and addicting transformation, and an alt mode that screams, "F you, I'ma run you over." Of course, the best rendition of this beast would obviously have to be Robots in Disguise Scourge, so much that it overrides many people's association as the main wearer of this design, possibly myself included, having grown up with the original RID 2001 cartoon instead of the toys. I've always loved this design, both on screen, in miniature form, and eventually at full size. For years, however, I've always wanted an updated version, mostly so I have someone to go alongside my modern Chug for photography. I'm of the opinion that the OG toy doesn't really need an update per se, with basically all the articulation that you could ask for, save for a thigh swivel, and a chunkitude that most certainly wouldn't carry over if they made a new one. We've seen what happened to Galaxy Upgrade Optimus Prime, after all, even if I still really like that thing. Even so, I've always thought that one would be neat, one that wasn't from the spindly reveal the Shield version. Fortunately, the opportunity in Legacy was well and truly missed when the deco designer forgot to do his research and went for a standard Nemesis Prime deco instead. The Velocitron rendition has its fans, and I'd far from call it a bad toy, but it just does not do it for me. It's not Scourge, it was never trying to be Scourge. Not through nefarious releasing a proper one later means, but simply through an oopsie whoopsie. I'm not making this up, you can check the wiki. So I sat down and came to terms with the fact that I'd have to wait a decade or so for the next attempt. But coincidentally, the table I was sitting at was a dinner table with Michael, and lo and behold, he was selling the Tokyo Toy Show version, as the previous buyer had fallen through. This was the kind of sale that just doesn't happen, even though it literally happened twice this year. I immediately jumped on the opportunity, and I've been smitten with this figure ever since. Of course, he's not just good in comparison to the Velocitron version, he's just an amazing figure as is. From head to toe, this thing is absolutely gorgeous, bringing the design into the modern era and modernizing it just enough to give it its own identity, without missing the point from the original. This mold has always Unfortunately just hidden underneath mounds of stickers, but in this new form, he really rises to true brilliance. And newsflash, the rest of the figure is actually really good. People tend to write off the Times Return triple change of Voyagers because of the headmaster gimmick, with a dash of bad deco thrown in there. But aside from this abomination, they've always hidden truly amazing conversions under the surface. Yes, even Galvatron, just look at how Super Megatron eventually turned out. And the Optimus Prime mold is no exception, hiding its kibble very well for what it's trying to do. Proportionally, it's a bit odd, but sculpting and deco-wise, it's a true sight to behold. It's easily the perfect Scourge to throw in with the rest of the modern Chugfellas. It's also put me on a bit of a journey to get every Laser Optimus Prime adjacent release, which surprisingly, I'm pretty close to doing so. Might take a couple of years for the last few, but it'll be a hell of a ride. And with this Scourge following me for the rest of the way, I'm ready for it.
Number 15.
Do you know how long I've been waiting for a decent Minerva? I don't need to go into detail about how difficult it was before. I literally just did a few minutes ago. Nightmare fuel, nightmare to build, nightmare to mess with. Us Minerva fans, I guess. So when our Lord and Savior Mark Clonus descended from the heavens and baked the update into the Elita mold, me, I was excited. Now, of course, this did mean that the Elita we got did fall a little flat. Personally, I'm more partial to the Voyager Plane version, but honestly, I'd say this is a good trade-off. It was absolutely worth it, because finally having a Chug Minerva just feels right. Granted, a lot of the adoring comes from the toy hacks installed, but even that aside, it's just a nice little figure. The head sculpt is absolutely on point, and honestly, I kind of prefer her not being a headmaster. Nothing wrong with headmasters, as this list will show, but this does cater to my specific tastes, and I dig it. The proportions and kibble integration are fantastic. Yes, she has a backpack, but it works in a clean and unintrusive way. And I love the way the legs work. Just simple, but oh so effective. And sure, the vehicle mode isn't exactly accurate, but I kind of prefer the buggy look personally. It just gives her a more rugged vibe, which I know isn't really in line with the character, but it sure as shit beats whatever the this was trying to be. Seriously, this is one of the few times third party is worse than the Hasbro version. Though that's not just because the fans hobby one is bad. Legacy Walgreens Minelba is a bloody brilliant release by herself, and I'm so glad to have her. Honestly, at this point, who am I still waiting for good figures to be made of? Takara did Ryder, Nine Factory's doing Lyokaiser, Fans Hobby did Double Dealer. Really, it's just Stalker left. One day.
Number 14.
Contrary to popular belief, I don't really hate third-party masterpiece. I do hate when companies exercise excessive hubris or use accuracy as a crutch and give up on everything else. But the scale can deliver on some really good toys. It's just, for the most part, Hasbro delivers more consistently on the fun and playable updates school of design. And when they do it at a price point that's a lot more justifiable, that's usually what takes up my focus. With that said, sometimes I do dip my toe into things. And sometimes I'm very grateful that I do. As a combiner, X-Transbot's Menasor is a pretty piss-poor entry. Much like the Fans Toys version, they didn't really calculate the weight and tolerances beforehand and rushed the damn thing to market. It led to an overall package that was far too prone to breakages, an easy skip for anyone who's not too far gone down the rabbit hole. However, for the price of a deluxe, sure, I'll give Breakdown a try. Yeah, one of my friends went down a different rabbit hole, the all third party is evil and only Hasbro counts as true collecting rabbit hole, which fair. And I wasn't about to pass up such a bargain of an opportunity. And yes, he's pretty damn good. For once, we actually have him in the right colors, something Legacy forgot twice in a row. The feel of this thing is really good. It fits right in with all the existing Masterpiece figures I have. Sure, companies going off in their own direction can be nice, but it is nice to have something that just works right out the gates. The face sculpt is immaculate, the diecast is appropriate, and surprisingly, you can actually transform him rather smoothly without an issue. Considering this is X-Transbots of all companies, that's actually quite the achievement. And sure, what's probably the entire point of this figure fails miserably. This thing is never going to combine. The problem with X-Transbots is they typically operate on a first draft, final draft outlook, at least according to designers I've spoken to in the third-party industry. As a result, you can take a stroll through the TFW boards and find a plethora of broken copies that crumble under the weight of the combined mode's weight or snap mid-transformation. Christ, and I thought Terion was bad. It's not meant to be combined. Ever. But honestly, I don't think it needs to. As a self-proclaimed slut for Lamborghini Countashes, this is perfectly fine to me. Not gonna say it's better than the Legacy version, I still feel weirdly drawn to it way more than this thing, but I still really like this version here. It's not something I would have bought normally, were it not for the absurdly cheap price. But I am glad to have it. If I can accept a non-combining Onslaught from Universe 2008, I can easily accept a masterpiece like Breakdown. Probably because I'll keep buying Countashes until the heat death of the universe.
Number 13.
I've always been fond fond of the Earthrise Wheeljack mold. Upon announcement, it seemed to be one of the shittier figures from the first wave. In fact, I think I hated it more conceptually than Cliffjumper, before I got both in hand and the rest became history. Of course, that assumption didn't last long. Wheeljack became easily one of my favorites of the line. Sure, there were some dumpy proportions, but especially with a killer racing livery and Swish vehicle mode, the end result was a lovely rendition of Wheeljack. At least until the box set ruined it. Opaque plastic. Can they just stop using this bullshit baby blue? Now, what happens when you take a figure that lives and dies by its deco and give it an even better deco? Well, you get something truly spectacular. The blue is gorgeous. The torso is lush and vibrant with the piercing transparent red. The blue square in the middle is a bit weird, but far from frustrating in any way. I love the bronze he got on the head sculpt. It really gives him a mean aura. I still love the transformation, the way it spins effortlessly, how the extra windshield pieces fold out. I know these have a tendency to break over time, but it does nothing to hinder my enjoyment. And as far as I can gather, these are the most durable they've ever been, in clear form at least. And the alt mode, just outstanding. A beautiful blend of blue and black, a wonderfully premium release that blows the previous version out of the water. Even has silver rims, such beauty. Honestly, I don't know why I should be surprised. Time and time again, Action Masters being turned into proper Transformers have shown to be an absolute winner of a combination. And sure, there are things wrong with the release strategy. It shouldn't have been called Shattered Glass Slicer, because the Slicer deco is Shattered Glass Wheeljack. It should have been a double homage, but releasing it like this is kinda dumb. Not as bad as Flame War though, and for as much as I like the exosuit he comes with, a lot bemoaned his inclusion. Also, it was way too expensive. 2 deluxes does not equate to $120 dues. It's absurd. But as a figure itself, it's a truly delightful redeco of an already fun as molds. And I'll always take an instance of that because it's always going to be a great experience. I just don't get people who get angry at retools existing. If a toy is good, wouldn't you want to experience it again in an even cooler deco? No? Shame.
Number 12.
2021 was really the year where New Age popped the off. They went from just another contender in the third-party Legends War to the undisputed champions of small-scale design. When the year rolled over, they started hammering out banger after banger, nailing the accuracy to a reasonable degree, often more than Masterpiece, whilst still delivering endlessly enjoyable conversions. 2 of their biggest releases ended up running circles around the previously released Masterpiece outings. And the first of the 2 on this list is perhaps one of the most insane things they've ever pulled off. Masterpiece Bumblebee 2.0 was probably one of the worst releases Takara have ever done. It's the kind of bad where you don't have to experience it in person to understand. It's clear right from the stock photos. The beer belly, the double chin, the nightmarish face, the heinous engineering. Who thought this was a good idea? This is the perfect example of accurate to a fault, pushing things too far without the skill to pull it off in an intuitive way. You'd think from the way this turned out that it was something borderline impossible to do well, and yet New Age somehow did it. At smaller than a Micromaster, this thing manages to balance accuracy, visual appeal, adorability, and ingenious transformation. This is by far one of the cleverest conversions of the year. Despite being the size it is, it never feels too small for your fingers to work with. Despite folding inside out, nothing feels out of place. And it's so clean. How do you make a figure look this much better than the Masterpiece with this much cleaner a backpack? At the size of a penny! It shouldn't be possible! But what really settles it for me is the deco. The shattered glass, metallic blue, and neon green combo is a true sight to behold. And sure, you end up getting stuck with another version of the molds, whether you like to or not, but I've noticed a pattern with New Age. Even in the most ridiculous of instances where you'd think you'd be selling off the other version, you just can't bring yourself to. It justifies its own existence every time, and you're just like...
Fine, you can stay.
Of course, for me, Cliffjumper is the star of the show. Just goes to show that there's no excuse for doing this design shittily. If New Age can do it in a cave with a box of scraps, surely some of that brilliance can carry over to the official Hasbro versions, even at the deluxe price. Well, I guess that argument is moot now, though, since SSA 6 Bumblebee finally came out. His video's been in production so long that the pipe dream finally came true. But that aside, brilliant figure. New Age makes good shit, and this is no exception.
Number 11!
You have no idea how happy I am to see this thing being reissued later this year. Not because I need one, mind you. I mean, he's right here on this list after all. It's because he's so good. Even how this figure came about was insane. Originally, Mark pitched this as a retool of Origins Bumblebee. There's even behind-the-scenes stuff on it. But then he got an idea. What if he used the 3 allocated sprues to make an entirely new deluxe instead? So he got cooking and sent off his ideas to the Takara team. And who better to take this shit on than Shogo Hasui. Like, I don't think I need to go into detail who this man is. He's made some of the best toys I've ever reviewed. Of course, doing this can be a risk. Going above and beyond with fewer sprues to work with can be a bad idea. The following year, I'd argue it failed with Studio Series Rise of the Beast Optimus Prime. I stand by the facts the main line did it better. Accuracy is not a determiner of superiority, especially with this as a sacrifice. Against all the odds, however, Cosmos soars. Everything about him is utterly brilliant. The proportions are appropriately cuddly. I just want to give this tumbly lad a big old hug. The head sculpt is perfect. The colors are divine, especially with toy hacks. The posing is really dynamic and he's an endlessly fun bot to flip back and forth. Though that last point is very much emblematic of Hasui. I don't think there's been a more adorable flying saucer mode in this franchise. Not even the G1 doorknob can compare. One thing that really surprised me, though, was just how much better he was than the last few. Especially the thrilling 30 Legends release. I mean, for those who've been around for a hot minute, you'll recall that was a really good Legends figure, and yet it's been dethroned, completely and utterly. Sure, in stock form it's a bit hollow, but that's fixable if you really find it frustrating, and even without it, it's still a fantastic release. Should it have been a ridiculously hard to get exclusive? No, the scalping situation is ridiculous. I only saw it a grand total of once on store shelves, and I used that opportunity to send it over to Diamond Bolts, as I'd import it anyway. But the thing is, it should have been more abundant, which, to be fair, it is about to be very soon. But like, that's the one major issue I have with it. Everything else is absolutely wonderful. What more could you want from a fella like this? I don't know, maybe a voice role in an upcoming series about the Velocitron crew getting stuck on an asteroid? Seems hyper-specific, but maybe.
Number 10.
Core Class has fallen off a bit as of late. Even before the leak of its supposed cancellation next year, the signs were already there from the start. Legacy's outings were sort of all over the place, with no key theming, and Studio Series just sort of shut out a couple of figures here and there, then shrugged and gave up. I really wish they'd gone further though, because with a few exceptions, Studio Series gave us some really good cores when it actually put something out. Ratchet doesn't seem like the kind of figure that would blow anyone away. I mean, it's a G1 carbot with a pretty simple established conversion scheme. Not only that, but it's basing a lot of its mechanical detail on the heavily disliked Earthrise version. Sure, that mold works well in a few specific instances, but Ratchet isn't one of them. Well, to my surprise, this mold it's incredibly fun to convert, reusing some previously seen ideas, but doing them in a way much better than what was provided previously. I love the boxy aesthetic, even more so than the Voyager they dropped in the same way. And sure, the shoulder emblems are a bit naff, but it's far from the worst attempt I've seen them try to do. Plus, you know, war crimes and all. And the alt mode is just the perfect little representation of the classic van. Kinda crazy that they were able to do this so well at Legend scale, yet f***ed it up so bad previously with the exclusive Deluxe. Hell, I'd even argue I prefer this rendition to both Magic Square and the two New Age versions I've got. Sure, the New Age ones were a bit of a flunk, but outclassing the Magic Square one is a pretty crazy achievement. It just goes to show that Legends can go hard in a way unique to its own price point. And with figures as good as these, I just wish they'd do more. I mean, sure, this of course led to its own redeco with Ironhide, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same. Ratchet just has this feeling to him that cannot be beat, which puts him pretty high to the top of the list of favorite core class figures. Maybe it's best to remember figures like Ratchet, rather than lament the lost potential as we go into a new trilogy. Maybe it's best to just imagine the smooth, sultry voice of Jeffrey Combs ASMRingly putting you to sleep. Jeffrey Combs.
Number 9.
I have never liked the original Siege Optimus Prime. It's not because of the concept, it's not because of the show, it's just that it feels almost ashamed of what it wants to be. The alt mode isn't exactly Cybertronian, but it's a pretty good cyberpunk interpretation of the original G1 design. It comes together quite well, and it sets itself up for a wonderful robot mode. But then, it throws it all away. It hides all the specialized detail and just goes for a bog-standard G1 robot mode. It would be perfectly fine if that were the intent, which is why I ended up liking the Earthrise version a lot more. But it just feels like you've had a nice big juicy steak placed in front of you and you've eaten 3 bites and it's yoinked away from you. Like, what the f***? Wasn't helped by some disappointing hip articulation and this weird red plastic that has the unfortunate effects of washing out all the detail. Though apparently that's something only I take issue with, and I'm psychotic or something. So yeah, not the best experience on my end. However, that doesn't mean it can't be redeemed. I don't know what it is, but for some reason I was drawn to the premium finish version. It wasn't because it was more accurate or anything. Really, it just had a vibe to it that couldn't be denied. Of course, the plastic is fixed, which for me is a big thing, but I also vibe with this new digital paint camo much more as well. It just feels a lot more premium than what we got back in Siege, I guess emblematic of the toy line name. It's really cool to see it done so well too, because while it can be done well even at retail, much of the premium finish line didn't. But what really does it for me are the green windows. Not only are these stunning, and not only do they give this design something distinct from the other 5 billion G1 Optimus Primes in my collection, but they also add a through line between the vehicle and robot modes. There's now something that carries over and makes itself known on both ends. It makes him feel like more than just a G1 Optimus cosplaying as a Cyberpunk 2077 vehicle. Wait, that game wasn't out when Siege dropped, so, I guess Blade Runner 2049? Wasn't that what I said in the original video too? And I know I've seen a certain criticism go around that many use as a reason to dislike this. Greater accuracy to the show means it's associated with said show. Said dumpster fire of a show. But honestly, no, I don't actually associate that with this at all. I just see it as a decent mold finally getting its day in the sun in a way where I can finally appreciate what it does well. It might seem weird to many that this is the figure that finally let me enjoy the mold properly, but yeah, I love this thing. I didn't even care that it initially came faulty, missing a pin in the torso. Nah, I just took that shit from the Siege version. Even got a replacement from Robo, which I ended up gifting to Firebite27. So he was able to experience the brilliance too. You should have seen his reaction when he was expecting just another Cosmos I sourced him from a local sales forum, and ended up with a whole other figure as well. Shit was priceless. I really like how the Legacy Stunticons turned out, but giving them a proper spot on this list is somewhat difficult. I can't really place the full combined mode because technically I completed it in 2022, and even then I'm not really sure it warrants a place on the best of the year lists. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's good, really good. It just doesn't get me as excited as what actually ends up on this list. Motormaster was fine, I guess, but is more of a vehicle for the combiner as a whole, no pun intended. I know I like puns, but I swear this was unintentional. Unlike the previously reviewed Magic Square version, he doesn't inspire any major feelings as a standalone robot, which kinda disappointed me on release. My favorite Stunticon was a 2022 figure, so he's out. And his mold predecessor, well, I guess the vehicle is nice, but as a standalone robot, even with toy hacks, he's a bit boring. So that leaves Dragstrip and Dead End, and I'm giving this spot to both of them, because, without a shred of irony, I think these two are brilliant. These two were hated on announcements, and even to this day, they generate a lot of ire. And that makes sense. There are things about them that set off the fandom, things that are legitimate criticisms. Dragstrip is pretty bland in robot mode, likely because they didn't want any paint brushing up against the combiner arm, and the hollowness is rather annoying, and Dead End's proportions are a bit wonky given the way the back of the car works. But even amidst those valid issues, I still think these are awesome. They're weirdly dynamic with the articulation provided, and the killer sculpting accentuates it a lot, especially with Dead End. This shit is awesome, can't wait to make it even better with upgrades. Beyond that, they've got a lot of that tangible 80s robot appeal to them. It's not something I can put into words, but something about them just makes me smile as far as the robot modes go. The head sculpts are absolutely spot on, even if Dragstrip got less brains than the bad Lorenzo, not the good one. The engineering is classic combiner simple, and it's just fun to do over and over. I realize this is something I've said over and over in this video, but I really just like fun transformations, complex or simple. And the alt modes, Christ, they are something else. They're so dynamic, so smooth, so perfectly emblematic of the characters. I mean, that's just straight up a fucking Porsche. They're going as ballsy as they did with Jazz, and they're doing this in a pre-Rise of the Beasts world. And if that wasn't enough, the combination gimmick is a real treat. It takes the concepts already seen on the Magic Square version and imbues it with the toyeticism that makes combining these effortless. Although as standalone toys I still find Breakdown the superior outing, I'll always respect these for showing just how far Hashtag were willing to get these right. It's no wonder they didn't do more combiners for ages after Menasor was finished, citing exhaustion as the reason. That reasoning is plain as day in these releases. They're not just good because the versions that came before were shit, they're just genuinely good. Now, all we need for the G2 stuff is Wild Rider and Motormaster, or really just Motormaster, as I think Wild Rider leaked earlier. Almost there, guys, just a little bit further.
Number 7.
New Age comes back onto the list again with the undefeated champion of Legend Scale G1 Optimus Primes. I don't think any company has made something of this caliber for this character. Sure, Magic Square has an alternative, but there's just no way it's engineered this well. It expertly brings the toon proportions to life, with a slight toy filter added over the top. It's clean, super clean. SS86 wishes it could be this clean. Still want it though. They nailed the head sculpt with just enough of an angular edge to allow it to fit into the current aesthetic, but still unmistakably toy-style Optimus Prime. And it's actually a retool, not a half-assed redeco with stickers slapped on. It's actual retooling and actual tamper graphing. And they pulled this off before Takara theirs out. They're ahead of the game, and beyond that, it's just a really fun figure to mess with. It's packed with articulation, and said articulation all works wonderfully to give this guy a super dynamic feel. And even then, none of that impacts the molasses-like transformation. They took one of the most difficult designs to do, filled with the necessity for faux parts, and not only did they make the experience a piece of cake to flip through, but they did it at such a tiny scale. While I think the Cliffbee conversion was more impressive, given how royally f***ed up it was prior, this blows it out of the water on a quality level. Gotta be top 5 Legends conversion of all time, easily. Of course, if this isn't to your fancy, there's a gazillion redecos, including an alternate mold version that combines with the Magnus armor. And there are things I prefer about that version, specifically the powered convoy loadouts. I prefer the head sculpt, and the engineering in the legs is a lot more smooth, as they're not beholden to toon accuracy, instead focusing on making it flatter to fit into the dire boots. But as an overall experience, I have to give it to Prime here. He's just the perfect Legends Optimus Prime, and an awesome companion to their previously released Megatron. It's the kind of figure that'll take a firm grip of you and send you plummeting down the third-party Legends rabbit hole. And I know this for a fact because it's happened to at least 3 friends of mine. That's the sign of a fantastic figure right there, a figure that occupies your consciousness in the best of ways, even 2 years later.
Number 6.
Kingdom Mirage is a figure that I still feel doesn't get enough respect. Time and time again, I've tried to go into bat for it, highlighting the improvements it's made. No more wonky alt mode, no more disappointing conversion, no more weird proportions, no more weirdly placed clear plastic, better articulation, better kibble management. How many deluxes have an ab crunch? How many deluxes can pull off poses like this? Is he better than classics? I'd say no, but out of the 2 recent-ish Chug versions, I'd say he's the better one. But all I ever get in response is complaints of there not being a missile launcher port on his shoulder. Time and time again, people constantly discount everything this figure does right because it doesn't have an accessory port. Apparently this minor part is the most important part of the figure, and the rest doesn't even matter. There is not a single local TF fan I know who prefers the Kingdom version, and it's all for that very reason, and it saddens me to no end. This is why I'm so glad this mold is finally getting the respect it deserves with the redecos that followed. As Mirage metamorphoses into new versions and characters, people are starting to come around, or at least they would be if they were easier to get. Yeah, for as much praise as Crasher got, she unfortunately wasn't easily obtainable. Apparently Australia got more stock than America did, which was kind of shocking. Don't worry though, we made up for it by skipping Galaxy Shuttle. And it's a real shame because everyone that was able to get her loved her to bits, myself included. Already it's a good mold, but seeing it done up in this sexy as color scheme is a real treat. A lot of it comes down to the black convoy effect, but that's not the whole story. There's a lot of paint here in general, more than most deluxes in the trilogy. Maybe that's down to her stealing the budget allocation from Dragstrip, which, yeah, I can sort of see that happening, but you cannot deny the deco goes hard. And sure, the head sculpt isn't the most accurate, down to the GoBot designs being in a legal grey area thanks to their machine robo origins, but me, the toy style head goes hard in these colors. It's even the first time we get a good look at it, as the only previous use was in the Siege 3 pack. But you couldn't even see the thing. And the alt mode. Could this possibly be the best dragster in my entire collection? I mean, as far as alt modes go, I don't think there's much competition. Save for one figure a bit higher on this list. The perfect balance of black, white, and red, accentuating the already awesome angles. Seriously, this mold is the absolute shit. And you owe it to yourself to have at least one version of it in your collection. They just need to do it in red so we can finally finish the Hasbro update of the PCDX set. Still holding out, even if it looks like New Age is going to beat them by a slim margin, whenever their Sideswipe finally releases. Just, it's a wonderful release, and I hope it gets a second lease on life like a lot of the other Velocitron rarities. The only other thing I can complain about is how few accuse me of throwing it across the Pacific Ocean with no protection, despite padding the thing more than an American footballer. I guess using the original box to be economical is negligence, and I'm laissez-faire.
How could this happen to me?
Number 5.
I think a lot of people come into the MPG trainbots with the wrong kind of mindset. The criticisms people fixate on are valid, but I find that the entire point of this set is ignored simply because it's not what people wanted from it. For most Western collectors, the combine mode is, by and large, the most important. Everything else should be secondary because the combine mode is what it's mostly going to stay in, for better or for worse. Of course, there are some outliers, such as certain YouTubers having Superion crumble to pieces in their hands and still recommend its lifeless corpse, but that's usually what people want from a combiner. Masterpiece Gutai's first outing didn't follow this ideology. Much like train spotters in the West, Japan has its own group of train otaku with a similar enthusiasm to the likes of Dick Mabutt. And this subculture is thriving, just like train collectors are thriving in the West. Takara knows this. They've had insane success with Plarail and Shinkalion, perhaps even more so than Transformers in recent years. So, of course the train modes are going to be the priority, and of course the robot modes are going to be secondary, and of course the combined mode is going to be the thing they think of last. As much as I enjoy combining it, you can tell it's not the main intent. These things are supposed to be hyper-accurate trains that turn into reasonably tune-accurate robots. And as releases that do that, and as a kid who spent a good 3 years of his childhood growing up around Plarail and Japanese trains, as my parents were English teachers in Japan at the time, I love these releases to bits. Well, most of them anyway. But ignoring what was to come, their first outing was a real treat. In fact, I'd say they might have peaked too early, or almost at least. Would have been a definitive statement if it weren't for Kyan. Shorky though. Man, I love this thing. The train takes me right back to my childhood. I vividly remember riding the real model of this thing to and from the airport whenever my family would go away on holiday. It's been rendered with immaculate detail. It feels weighty and gives off an uber premium vibe when placed on the included metal track pieces. It's even compatible with HO scale track, provided you're not in America. Laughs in Hobbyco. The transformation does take a bit of getting used to, but once you've got it down pat, it's an absolute joy to convert. Everything is super clever, like the good old days of Masterpiece, before everything crossed the threshold and became more steps for the sake of more steps slop. And the rubber mode is pretty nice too. Love the way the kibble becomes a sort of cape, flowing behind him. The articulation is as lovely as you'd expect it to be, and it's incredibly difficult to find a pose where he doesn't look dynamic. It may not be the full tune aesthetic a lot of Masterpiece fans are looking for, but I actually prefer the shift to realism they've gone with, harking back to the older Masterpiece figures around the release of MP10. It's just a really nice standalone Masterpiece Transformer. In the same vein as the previously covered X-Transbot's Breakdown, I enjoy him more as a release on his own than as a part of a greater whole. Yes, there are valid complaints for the combined mode, and yes, there will probably be better ride-ons on the market eventually. Hell, technically I'd say the G1 toy pulls the combined mode off better, but as Shorky, as just Shorky, I couldn't be happier with him. I really like MPG. I know it's not doing what a lot of people wanted it to do, but as robots that turn into trains, they're pretty good. Just don't try to tell me Zeta/Moon Studio is better. At least MPG doesn't disintegrate due to the plastic decomposing, and the faces don't look like they've taken death sticks from Attack of the Clones. Zeta ain't in this conversation. It never has been. Even if this was the worst combiner on the planet, it would still be better than Zeta.
Number 4.
It kinda surprises me just how frequently people miss the improvements female Transformers have had recently. For years and years, fembots were kinda shit. Corporate's short-sightedness on how well female action figures sell is a well-documented thing. Hell, in certain circles, it's still practiced. Then, Black Arachnia and Air Razor release. Neither were particularly inventive, but they were fembots done to the same level as most of the male Transformers. This was a big step forward, and yet people often ignore this, or take some of the recent releases. We have so many diverse and wonderfully crafted fembots, and yet people don't acknowledge the progress that's been made, the passion we're seeing in these releases, compared to,
Let's make a fembot mold and use that for everyone.
Bumblebee RC is on the same vein as this. I consider her a massive step forward for female representation in the franchise. They so easily could have taken the lazy route, given she had a grand total of pi seconds of screen time and she was sandwiched between 2 other concurrent RC releases with Space Jam DVD already in the oven, and yet she excels. The engineering is ridiculously clever, the articulation is stellar, they somehow managed to make her nightmare of a face sculpt work in plastic form. I hated how she looked in the movie, but somehow this works. How the does that happen? And the alt mode is probably the best Cybertronian bike we've ever gotten. Or at least the second best, with the best literally being a retool of her. It's a figure that you end up liking more and more the more you mess with and think about her. The antithesis of Legacy's attempt, releasing a few months prior. It's just a bloody fantastic figure. And even if it didn't make the splashes I'd hoped for, I'm glad it got its day in the sun. She was probably ignored a lot of the time, and even now, because of the abundance of RCs we've gotten, sometimes I still see a few here and there surrounded by other various RCs, lumped together as if they're the same figure. It's a shame, because they're not the same. This is actually a release of passion and ingenuity, going above and beyond what everyone expected at the time. Things wouldn't be where they are today without this RC, and I, for one, am glad they were able to stretch their creative muscles and prove to corporates that female Transformers can be awesome.
Number 3.
I don't know what it is with Iron Factory, but they seem to go really hard on their mini-bot releases. Their Warpath demolishes all other Warpaths on the market, including the third-party behemoths. The vibes on this thing were immaculate. It just felt like Warpath more than any other one we've gotten. And who could forget Cliffjumper, proving that you can do this design well without the need for parts forming, and going absolutely crazy on the engineering. Probably my favorite Cliffjumper I own as well. I'm beginning to sense a pattern here. Supposedly Pipes and Huff are in the same vein, but sadly I've not had the chance to pick up either due to prioritizing the avalanche of banger releases Hashtag are putting out. As for this particular year, the front runner of this trend was Sea Spray, a figure I was initially 50-50 on. I mean, it looked good, but I didn't feel I needed it. It wasn't until Rhymesworth and Dime started singing his praises for several days straight that I realized, okay, this is some good shit. I need this. And he was right. This Sea Spray is bussin'. For starters, he's absolutely fucking adorable. He's not super deformed or anything, but he exudes the energy that a mini-bot should. He's probably the most dynamic Legends figure I've gotten all year, even more so than the New Age figures that littered this video. There's just something about the way the mechanical detail works, accentuating the already pretty good posing. Colors are fantastic. He's not covered in paint, but the color choices are perfectly appealing. They've toned down the white, so the blue takes center stage instead. It's a really cool aesthetic, and not one I think we're going to see outside of this. And while the engineering isn't anything particularly special, just standard Iron Factory fare, dear god, the vehicle mode is stellar. It's not often we get to see catamarans in anything tangential to the franchise. Even less often when they're done well. And boy, this is done well. Every time you look at this thing, more details come to life. The air intakes, the flotation devices, the killer windshield, the greebling, it's all breathtaking to behold. Even has perfect weapon integration, something you don't often see on any type of toy these days. Really, the only thing I can criticize is the fists at the back, but it's far from a deal breaker. Everything else about this is just pure brilliance. Honestly, I think this might have taken the top spot for best Sea Spray in my collection. Didn't think it'd be able to steal it from the Fans Toys 1.0 outing, but here we are. Yeah, there's definitely got to be a pattern here. I've somehow got to get their pipes pronto.
Number 2.
And of course, New Age couldn't be content with 2 spots this year. They just had to squeeze in one more figure, just to style on everyone else how cool they are. And, well, they just come out with a Red Mirage. No biggie. No problem. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a third-party company to do a Diaclone redeco? You gotta understand, third-party companies are often held to the same bullshit corporate nonsense Hashtag is. They often can projects simply because they're not G1 enough, stop using molds even when there are redecos people want, and insist on really stupid release strategies that even the designers are against. And here, New Age is just doing Solus Prime from RC, doing Hardtop from Beachcomber, doing Depth Charge from Cyclonus. Depth Charge from Cyclonus! And beyond that, sorry to repeat something I've said way too often in this video, he's just done really well. Even among the immense pedigree of New Age, this is easily one of the best figures they've ever put out. The sculpt work is immaculate, pulling off the character design perfectly. The paintwork is as good as it's ever been, with so many subtle details picked out in picture-perfect lining. The head sculpt, even at its size, captures the character perfectly. And once again, it's so clean. The transformation is easily on par with everything else they've put out this year. Super subtle and super clever. Everything just fits perfectly together, and the end result is divine. I still think I prefer Crasher in terms of dragsters overall, but this is still done really well. The tampografs are what make this especially good. They breathe so much life into this figure overall. Honestly, there's not a lot I can say about it that I haven't already said about the other 2 New Age figures on this list. In fact, if I were to make this list now, I'd probably swap around Optimus Prime and Mirage, so that the second top spot was Prime instead. But here's the thing, I made this list back at the end of 2022, only adapting it into video form now, and by God, I'm going to stick to it. 2022 me must have had something with the toy that drew him to it, so I'm going to honor that decision and stand by it. Probably because it's Red Mirage, to be honest. That's a safe guess. But not every figure could be honored, simply because there were way too many good figures that released in 2022. As such, here are the honorable mentions. In no particular order, Studio Series Sideways. As I've said before, Silver Studio Series cars go way harder than anyone gives them credit for, and I think Sideways might be one of the best. He's just got an effortless vibe and a super fun transformation, and his robot mode is so dynamic. It's so cool you'd forget he dies in like 2 seconds. So much for canonically being a herald of Unicron. Nightwatch Optimus Prime. I always wanted this as a kid, but stupidly I asked my mum for Ultimate Bumblebee instead. Years later, I finally got this for a tenner on Marketplace in a way better condition than it has any right to be. It's a great mold with an awesome deco, and I wish it would return in some way someday. Unfortunately, as said earlier, Studio Series is allergic allergic to anything that isn't 100% accurate. Speaking of studio series, Bumblebee, Ratchet, and Ironhide. The engineering on these is really underrated, and the decos are immaculate. Really cool space buggy modes too. BotCon Lift Ticket easily demolishes the Selects version. Thrilling 30 still rocks. Funny how Lift Ticket ends up being on both the honorable and dishonorable mention parts though. New Age Depth Charge. Amazing deco and really cool interpretation of the Cyclonus molds. Wouldn't mind Hasbro doing a similar thing in the future. Works for Straxus. Wreckers Collection Diaclone Twin Twist. This mold was great back in Time's Return, and I think I might actually prefer this deco, wibbly knees aside. Now, where's Topspin? Come on, Hasbro! Tentegrity Optimus Prime. Weird how this is classified as a masterpiece in the West, and it's sort of false advertising as they didn't give us the metallic finish they promised. But I can't get mad at this tumbly fella. F even building the stand he comes with. Dadbod Prime is just funny. Studio Series Bumblebee Thundercracker. Easily the best of the 4 Seekers released, with an awesome deco and keeping the gas mask heads, which is greatly appreciated. Between this and Thrust, I actually realized I'd had my fill, so I skipped Skywarp and have since sold off Starscream. Legacy Iguanus. I probably don't need to explain in too much detail, as many already consider him the best core class figure ever. If not though, I guess I'll see you in 2 or so years when I get around to the Legacy core class review. E-Hobby, GoBots, Treads, Road Ranger, and Pathfinder. Post-COVID, I had a bit of extra cash, so I splurged on everyone in the set except Bug Bites. Out of the lineup, these 3 are my favorites. They're adorable. Kingdom Galvatron. I've explained my journey in the War for Cybertron video already, and I'm so glad I went on that journey. The original deco just hits right, and I actually prefer the battle damage. Looks plain without it, IMO. Kingdom Slammer, a wonderful surprise that showed parts-forming Transformers can actually be good. Love this little lad, and I'm gonna miss the parts-formers when they're gone. Core Class Bumblebee Shockwave. Maybe a bit pointless in the face of the Voyager, but still a very fun core figure that's a blast to flip back and forth. And finally, Reissue Retrax. Yeah, it's a bit of a shit figure, and yeah, the meme can go a bit too far at times. But I do genuinely like this one. It leans extremely hard into its gimmick, with no shame and no second guessing, and I kinda love it for that. Maybe we could learn a lot from his outlook on life, but no figures have connected with me more than that which takes the #1 spot. And it's pretty obvious if you've seen my review lineup. You have to understand, this isn't just a toy for me. As a toy, it's a pretty damn good one, with its enjoyable build, awesome design, and actually fun transformation. It's a figure that endears itself to you as much as the concept connects with you, but that's not why it's here. Lego Optimus Prime, for me, isn't just a toy. It's a representation of survival. I grew up in a really shitty environment. Not the worst on the planet, but the kind of environment where anything that wasn't nihilistic pseudo-intellectualism was heavily criticized and abused over. It's the kind of household that giving a 12-year-old Friedrich Nietzsche was perfectly acceptable. Yeah, throw out your Warhammer collection and contemplate the pointlessness of the universe. Never read it, not planning on anytime soon. Anything even remotely capitalist or related to popular culture would incur days and days of gaslighting and emotional distress, because apparently I was a shit person and a disappointment to everyone in my life. Growing up and moving beyond that, discovering that yes, I am a nerd, and nothing will change that. That's where this figure fits in. Lego Optimus Prime is the prize at the end of the journey, combining my 2 childhood loves that I had to hide for so long, and doing them both well. It's only after I was able to start fixing myself, enjoying life, if only to a moderate level, that I was able to realize other things about myself. I feel like I'm slowly peeling away layers and layers, getting slightly worse, then eventually better each time. And Lego Optimus Prime is the signpost at the start of that. I can look back on him and remember how far I've come, how much I've improved. Every time I bring this figure out, I'm filled with a sense of joy. It's a monument to everything I'm into, everything I'm finally allowed to be into. It's got its issues, but me, I love this thing so much. I love everything it represents, from the designer, to how the instructions work, to how the transformation is quintessentially Optimus, to what this could mean for the future. Imagine a whole toy line of figures of this caliber. Imagine doing a bunch of these at an affordable price tag, sitting on shelves and letting kids make their own custom characters. Perhaps time will tell whether that comes to pass, but in the meantime, the idea did continue, just not in the way I would have hoped. But this is a primarily positive video, or at least I'm trying to make it so. So perhaps that's another story for another time. Looking back, 2022 was a year without much focus. This year, I really know what I want. Official, the occasional New Age, and Iron Factory Lyokaiser lineup. 2022, it was sort of all over the place, with a lot of figures that I wouldn't have gotten normally. And that kind of makes the year interesting. Looking back, I'm reminded of figures that I wouldn't have thought about otherwise. It's not like it was all Legacy Trilogy or all Studio Series. It's not one long continuous line, it's a bunch of random bullshit. And I kinda love it for that. Of course, I don't think I can collect that same way anymore. Priorities change, and the importance of certain other lines takes priority. Each year, I'm buying fewer and fewer figures, and I'm kinda happy about that. I don't feel tied to back collecting as much, or obligated to buy every single thing. It's relieving, you know? With that said, I'm glad for what I got in this year, and I'm glad to have the kind of collection I have now. Of course, unfortunately, with the way things are going now, I'm probably not going to be able to do the 2023 list until the new year. But hey, at least I managed to make sure I don't fall any further behind, right? Right? God, this channel's a mess. But as always, fan and public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your 2022 lists below. What did you collect? Did you agree with the placements of certain figures? Have I missed anything that you would have put in number 1? I mean, it's subjective, but maybe I've enraged you. Big thanks once again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video, letting me quite literally take a seat. I swear to God, either this shark or the Scottish bastard are gonna be the death of me. Don't forget to use the code C730 for $30 off a single purchase, with a 30-day return period if it doesn't tickle your fancy. And as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time!